On today's episode of In the Know, we'll be going back to basics and exploring how to reconcile a bank account in QuickBooks Online with ProAdvisor trainer Carla Caldwell. The training she'll present is an excerpt from the banking course found in our newly reimagined QuickBooks Online certification. In this training, Carla will walk you through the principles of reconciliation, viewing the account statement, reconciling an account, resolving reconciliation issues, and reviewing the reconciliation report. So with that, let me welcome Carla. Carla, welcome, and thanks for leading us through another training.
It is great to be with you, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. And I know that anybody that's watching this is super excited because who doesn't love a good bank reconciliation? So let's dive in and get started on what that is going to be all about. So what we're going to be talking about today are just some principles of reconciliation. We're going to talk about how we can view the account statement right inside of QuickBooks. Of course, we're going to reconcile it. And because not everything goes smoothly all the time, we're going to talk about how to handle issues with reconciliation and make sure we understand that reconciliation report and know how to access it. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So let's start out with those principles. How often should we be doing that? When should we be doing it? And what makes it successful? So we should be doing a reconciliation at the end of each month. Typically, that is what we would recommend that we do. Typically, that's going to include checking accounts, savings accounts, and credit cards. Now, I say every month. Doesn't necessarily mean end of month because we know those dates can be a little weird sometimes, but it typically should be on a regular basis. And while that seems pretty obvious, perhaps for some of us, we don't want to do this on a daily basis. That could be a lot. What we are going to do is manage those bank feeds. We talk about that in another session on a daily basis. Bank feed management on a daily basis, but reconciliation typically at the end of a period. Now, typically that should happen usually a couple days after the beginning of the month, because if it covers last month, usually the first, second, third, fourth of the month is when we're able to get those statements and be able to actually do that reconciliation. So hopefully you're going to see as we go through this, you won't have to wait for it to come in the mail. You'll be able to see it right inside of QuickBooks. Now, one other thing about reconciliation that's important is how do we know it's been successful? It's not just that we reconcile and it says the difference between the bank statement and what's in QuickBooks is zero. Yes, we want that zero to be there. We don't want to force it to be, adjusted or whatever, but we need to make sure that that zero difference makes sense. Did we clear the right transactions? Are there any transactions that are in QuickBooks that did not clear the bank that should have, or that have been hanging out there for a while? Things like that. So we are going to make sure that we are able to know that we did the reconciliation. We didn't have to force an adjustment to happen, but that we really trust that reconciliation. Think of being a detective as you go through this part. We're really wanting to dig in and make sure we understand what's going on and are looking at the things there with a critical eye to make sure that things are accurate in the books that we're working in. All right, so how do we go in and take a look at this workflow? How do we see our account statement? So before we can actually do that reconciliation process, we need to have, of course, the beginning balances. What was that? And of course, typically what we're most concerned about is that ending balance from the bank or credit card statement. So we need to have those. And of course, we need the activity that has happened throughout the month as well. Now, the good news is, and I mean really good news is, if the account, the bank account, credit card account is connected to QuickBooks, then what you're going to see is those statements may automatically already be sitting inside of QuickBooks waiting for you. What does that mean? It means that we don't have to go log in and download that from our client's bank statement or wait for them to send it to us. It's already sitting there ready for us to go. So the moment it's released by the bank, it's inside of QuickBooks and we don't have to worry about going and finding it. It's super easy. And we don't have to worry about paper, which is really helpful for me. I'll lose paper, so we don't want to do that. So where do we see this? Inside of QuickBooks, on this screen that you see here, you're going to see that next to the account that we're selecting to reconcile, just to the right of that, and you'll see it on the screen here outlined in pink, it says View Statements. that is where we would actually view the account statement. Now, if you go into your QuickBooks and you don't see, it says view statements, but above where it says which account do you want to reconcile, it says to enroll to download those. Just select enroll. You don't have to log in again. It should just start pulling those in for you. Might take a few minutes, but if you're able to, those will come in automatically if the bank allows it, which is wonderful news. So if we do see the view statements, what do? We select that view statements, and a little side, drawer, if you will, pops up over on the right side, and that slides open and you can see any statements that are there. Now, if you happen to have been using QuickBooks for a while, maybe you hadn't reconciled in a few months or your client hadn't, but they had already been pulling in the statements, there could be multiple months there, but it shows you any unreconciled statements. Little trick, the other tab says reconciled. Yes, that means you can go back to ones that were already reconciled previously and look at those statements. They are now stored inside of QuickBooks. Oh, love it. Okay, so that's where we're able to see the statements. So again, we don't have to go download those somewhere else. We can select that and QuickBooks will open it up in another window for us. And if you're like me and you have a big wide monitor or you have multiple monitors, you can put it on another screen while you do your reconciliation inside of QuickBooks. You don't even have to print it if you don't want to. All right, so we did that. We also have the ability, of course, to be able to manually upload statements as well. So we have clients whose bank is not able to do this or doesn't allow it or whatever the situation is, we're still able to add those in. Now, we're able to go here on the main reconciliation screen where we selected view statements a moment ago, and in the top right corner, it says history by account. And so typically, if a statement is already there, then you would see that there's an attachment and the statement would be there. If you do your reconciliation, having manually downloaded it from the bank or the client sent it to you or you've scanned it or whatever the situation, you can, at the end of the reconciliation, QuickBooks knows that you didn't have a statement inside the system already, and it will ask if you want to upload that. And so I highly recommend that. Now, if your firm is like mine, you probably store those in some other file storage place as well, but it's so handy to have right inside of QuickBooks. It's wonderful for us to be able to review those and peek over our team's shoulder every once in a while and do spot checks. To have it right there, super easy. So I highly recommend it. All right, so if you're like me, staring at slides the whole time is not the way to go. So I am going to go over to our sample company and show you how we do the reconciliation. So what you're going to see is that I have moved over. You should now see QuickBooks Online, and you'll notice that I am in the sample company. This is the same sample company that you have access to. Remember, when you're at your main QuickBooks Online accountant screen in the top right corner, there's a little gear icon in the top right. If you select that, you're able to access the sample company, which is Craig's Landscape and Design. So this is where you are if you want to do that. And of course, you'll notice that I'm over in the transactions area, and then I can go over to where it says reconcile. Now, I can also do that by going here or here. Either way, as long as you get there, we're good to go. Now, this is the first time I've done this in the sample company, so it wants to show me how it works. You don't have to watch that video now if you don't want to, because you're watching this video. So if you want to watch it again, feel free, but we're just going to go ahead and get started. Now, we're in a sample company, and the sample company is going to be a little different than what you experience. So for example, you would have a view statements button here, or as I mentioned, an enroll button up here that would allow you to get those statements brought into QuickBooks. But we're going to pretend that I have a paper copy or I have my bank statement on another screen, and I'm just going to walk you through the process. I'm going to go ahead and put in an amount, and I'm going to put in a date. And actually, I probably should just do more like today's date. You know that if I put a T, it puts in today's date. So now you know when I did this. I'm going to go ahead and start reconciling. Before I do, one really quick thing. Did you notice this orange box up here? Or if you're like me, you just ignore anything and keep going because you're busy and focused. This is really great because it's letting you know that there are transactions in the bank feed, in the transactions area, that have not been managed. They're still sitting there. So when I go to do my reconciliation, it's very possible that I'm going to need those. So it lets you know that you might want to go categorize those first. I think that's pretty awesome. So now I'm going to go ahead and start reconciling, completely ignoring the warning. Not that you would ever do that. You're going to get a few little warnings up here. I'm going to close those down and make it where they don't pop back up again as I'm working through here. And so what you're going to see is that this is where we do the reconciliation. Now, remember, we're matching the bank statement balance to the QuickBooks book balance. So we have the statement ending balance. I typed that number in there. It had a beginning balance of $5,000. It shows any payments or deposits. I haven't checked anything off yet, so you don't see those numbers. And the difference is this right here. We want that number to be 0. But remember, we want to make sure that that number at 0 makes sense. In other words, we checked off all the right things. There's no transactions that didn't clear that probably should have, that were old, all that type of thing. Now, couple things to be thinking about here. As we think about this cleared balance, we need to make sure that what this is it's taking the beginning balance minus the payments plus the deposits. And so that's how it comes up with that. So we obviously have a difference and need to do that because the difference between what QuickBooks cleared balances and the statement ending balance is a difference of this. If at any time you realize you put in the wrong date, feel free to click Edit Info. That allows you to update the amount and or the date. Not that I've ever transposed numbers, but I'm sure somebody might have, right? Actually, I have many, many times. Okay, if I want to narrow down the list of transactions by just looking at payments or deposits, I can do that. Or in my case, I'm looking at them all and in date order. You'll also notice that there's a filter over here. You're going to see that there is a filter that is automatically filled out based on the statement ending date. If you're really digging in and finding out that there's some issues, sometimes changing that filter date could be very helpful. Now, in our scenario here, as I look through the list of all the transactions here, I would typically expect if this bank account or credit card account had been connected to the bank feed, meaning those transactions were coming in automatically, and I was matching those two transactions in QuickBooks or adding them into QuickBooks from the bank feed, there would be a cleared date here. There would also be in this column that looks like two rectangles on top of each other next to the payment and memo fields. That also tells me that those are connected through the bank feed. So I could have manually marked something cleared. Typically, that's not the case, but this and this usually indicates those are connected when we did our bank feed. But this information is really great. I can go in here, take a look at the transactions, understand what's going on, even see where they were coded to many times. And so that can really help me with a level of confidence that the transactions that I'm marking that have cleared are the correct ones. If I'm looking at this and I realize Tanya's Nursery, I'm looking at this transaction and I'm thinking, why in the world did they put that to job expenses? I can take a look at that transaction by simply selecting it and choosing edit. I can even add a memo here that explains things and so on. So there are some options here to do some editing kind of on the fly, if you will, and that can be very, very helpful as well. So that's what we would do here as we go through the process. Now, in our case, for our sample company, remember it's a sample company, so it's going to go really smoothly, which isn't always reality, but we're going to say that it is for now. I'm going to use the option here at the very top. You can see this is the top of this grid, and I'm going to select that option, and QuickBooks is going to say, hey, are you sure you want to select all the transactions? I mean, let's be honest, that's not always the case, that it's really going to happen that way, but today it is, and I'm going to say, yes, select all. Now, when I do that, immediately my difference is 0. But remember, put on your detective hat, double check that that really does make sense. Again, I would always recommend that you've kind of looked through it. If it had been connected to the bank account, you would see the icons here and a cleared date here. Really helpful, because if you have a transaction that cleared in February and you're doing the January bank statement, does that make sense that it would have cleared in the future, but yet you're putting it in this reconciliation? So sometimes we just want to double check those things. Usually you're okay. QuickBooks is not going to serve that up to you, but sometimes we need to. So there's going to be some things that might be helpful to just review this. So we've talked about this in other sessions I've done with you where we trust but verify. So we're going to do the same thing here. But in our case, it looks Pretty awesome. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish now. When I select finish now, we're going to have this marked as reconciled. And when I select done, then what you're going to see is that that reconciliation is now as of the date that I put in. Everything looks great. That ending balance has now become my beginning balance, and I'm ready to go for the next period that I need to reconcile for. Now, I want to just quickly show you a couple quick things. I don't know if I'm supposed to or not, but I just get excited talking about it. So if I go to summary, you can see that I see a list of all the accounts that have been reconciled, what the ending date was, and the actual date it was reconciled. Super helpful. But let's look at the history by account. So that was a summary of all accounts. This is the summary of the specific account that I'm doing the reconciliation for. You can look at it for just the past year or for all dates, and it'll group it based on the year. You can see that was the ending balance. Any changes that have been made since the reconciliation, that's what would show up there. If it was an auto adjustment, meaning somebody forced the reconciliation, they didn't get to the zero and they went ahead and reconciled it anyway, that would show there. And if I wanted to, remember I mentioned this, we're in a sample company, so it didn't ask me, but I could attach a statement here, even if it wasn't already pulled into QuickBooks for me. And at any time, I could go back and look at that reconciliation report as well. So just some great stuff there to share with you on a reconciliation. Oh, if only they were all that easy, right? Okay, let's back over to our presentation and continue on. So we did a straightforward reconciliation, but as I said, they don't always go that smoothly. So what do we do to resolve reconciliation issues? So if we go in to do a reconciliation and you see this red box here that says your account isn't ready to reconcile yet, and it tells you that the beginning balance is off by some amount, you see where it says we can help you fix it is in blue. We all know that typically if there is something hyperlinked on an internet search that we're doing or a web address or whatever, it means we can click on it. Same thing here. So we would want you to click on that where it says we can help you fix it. And it will tell you a bit about what is going on with this. And yes, even help you fix the issue, which is fantastic. Now, what I'm going to do is click on that. And when I do, a reconciliation discrepancy report comes up. Keep in mind, this is the only way to get this. Don't go to the reports menu and search for this. It's not there. The only way to get to the reconciliation discrepancy report is if there is an issue and you clicked where it said, we can help you fix it. Then you get to this report. Now, it's going to tell you exactly what's going on and what happened here. It will list out all the various transactions, and then you can view the history. Because remember, QuickBooks keeps that audit trail forever. So you're going to be able to see exactly what happened and who done it. Remember your detective hat. So what exactly has happened? In this case, a transaction was entered in, it was reconciled, and then lo and behold, it was deleted right here on this date by Winter Dixon. So mystery has been solved. Now, we don't know exactly why it was deleted, but we know that it was. And unfortunately, in this one situation where it's deleted, QuickBooks is not going to re-add that for you. You would need to re-enter it in. But fortunately for you, QuickBooks shows you exactly how it looked when it was reconciled so that you're able to put that back in again and continue on with your reconciliation. So what are some of the likely causes of those discrepancies? Well, the first one we just saw, reconciled transaction was deleted. Sometimes people will go into the register and manually unreconcile or reconcile a transaction, and that's a no-no. I tell my clients all the time, if you go into the register, you can look, but don't touch. And so that's typically what's happened. Sometimes people will go into a transaction and change it, even though it has been reconciled already. They've changed the amount, and obviously that's a problem. So that would be another likely cause. Somebody could have voided the transaction. So not a full delete, they just voided it, but it still was a reconciled item. So you've changed the amount basically to zero. So that's an issue. And then sometimes people will go in and change the source account. So it was a transaction, maybe it was a credit card transaction and it was off of account A and they've changed it to come out of account B. Well, that basically moved it out of that account, So the reconciliation is messed up. So those are the typical likely causes for that. So once you've looked into it, dug around a little bit about why that's happened, sometimes it's helpful to understand why people legitimately needed to do that, or they didn't know of a better way to do whatever it is that they were trying to do to fix it. Then we can help them out with that. Sometimes what I find is that we will have parameters around what we have our clients do and not do. If you have this issue, this is how you fix it. But if it's not that, pause, call us, let us do it, because sometimes it's easier for us to do it than to try to figure out what they did and then do the actual correction. So as we're doing this, this is your process that we would recommend that you use for fixing those. Review that beginning balance, check the ending balance you entered. So if you're not able to reconcile, double check that beginning balance one more time just to be on the safe side. I've tried to reconcile the wrong account and the beginning balance was wrong. And I was like, how is it not telling me? And it was the wrong account. Check the ending balance. Again, those transposition of numbers. Look at all the payments. See what's going on there. Sometimes we have payments from customers and we put it straight to the bank account instead of using undeposited funds and putting it into one single amount. That can cause some issues, and just in case something happened there, that can be an issue. Do the easy ones first. Clear the transactions you know are correct, and then you deal with those other ones. What transactions aren't in QuickBooks? That always is something that we have to double check as well. Is there anything missing? Sometimes we can't see that as easily. We also need to think about what transactions have we marked that cleared or maybe got matched that hadn't actually cleared the bank statement. So that's important. And then double check transactions that could be slightly off. So there are times when, as we all know, checks can clear for different amounts. And so just kind of watching through all of that. One really important call out here, you have a workbook as part of, or that is given as part of the QuickBooks certification course. And there's a ton of content in there that I highly recommend you check out as well. So there's additional resources available to you. And so that would be something to consider looking into as far as looking at all of those options of what to do when you have a really tough reconciliation. Speaking of really tough reconciliations, sometimes we need a do-over. And that's what undoing a reconciliation is all about. There could be times when somebody has made adjustments that they shouldn't have, or they cleared the wrong thing, or it's just so messy. We just need to start over. So what we often will do is what we call undoing a reconciliation. This is a function that as accounting professionals we have that our clients do not have. So it's really important to understand that we have this power. Another reason that I'm always recommending that you're logging into your client's books as the accountant user, not as a regular user, because you wouldn't have this option if you were just a regular user. So really important to understand that. Now, when should you do this? When it is just such a mess that you got to start over. But before you do, please go ahead and download that statement, the reconciliation, my brain just went completely in 12 directions, trying to remember what it's called, but our reconciliation report, there you go. That report, download that and hang on to it. You never know when you want to come back to it. And so download that report before you do the undo of the reconciliation. So go ahead and do that. We already talked about the who and then how. This is crazy easy. You're going to go to that column, that report that had a summary by account. Remember where we could go ahead and add the attachments and we could see when they did it. Was there an adjustment? There's an option there where we can actually select to undo a reconciliation. So really, really pretty incredible to be able to do that. So really great to do this. If you decide to unreconcile, say January, and you've already done February and March, just keep in mind that it's going to undo February and March as well. So January, February, March would be unreconciled. So remember, don't forget to download those reconciliation reports before you undo the reconciliation. This is the report I was talking about, the reconciliation summary report. This is the one at the end that we really want to make sure we have. This report is the one that's going to show us what happened in that reconciliation. It is a point in time report, meaning changes or things that happen after this are not reflected here. It doesn't update when you run that report again. It is what happened at that date and time when the report was reconciled. but it is super helpful to be able to review this. So let's go through this real quick. First of all, at the very top, it tells you the company's name, which account it was, what the period ending date was. It tells you when it was reconciled and who did it. So really great information right off the bat. But first and foremost, if something happened to have been changed since the reconciliation happened, front and center at the top of the report. So remember, let me back up a slide. Remember right here where it says that there's changes. That is what we're talking about here. Any reconciliation changes would show up here. So anything that happens since the reconciliation, that's the one thing that does update on the report. The actual report itself, as I said, is going to show who did it, what the date is, and then it has the summary of this reconciliation. It's going to show you from the bank side and from the QuickBooks side what it is, what was the statement, beginning balance, what cleared, any adjustments, and an ending balance. And then it's going to show you any other kinds of transactions that happened as of that date and after that date. So you can see all of the information of what's going on. In the details area, you're able to see each transaction that cleared. Cool thing is about this report is that I can click on this and actually go look at them too. So it's still live and connected to what happened in QuickBooks. It's not a static report. It is actually active where I can click on things. And of course, my deposits down below. Then you can see additional information. What has not cleared the bank as of the date of the reconciliation, and then what has not cleared that has actually been dated in the future. So if you were doing an entire year's worth of reconciliation, your January report would have, if there happened to be anything uncleared, it would show that. But below, it could have months of transactions that are dated afterward because it's a snapshot of time when that actually occurred. It shows you all of that information. So as you're going through this reconciliation report, I love these. I go back to them often. I review them with my team. I will tell you, this is kind of the bow at the end of the month for me. When we do our reconciliations, then we feel like our bookkeeping is completely done. We've reconciled things, and it just makes us feel like we know what's going on in the system really pretty well. And we definitely want to be looking at it. Couple little tips I'll tell you really quickly. Always watch those uncleared checks and payments. They shouldn't be getting really old. We should be dealing with those. Also, if you have a lot of deposits or payments that have happened and those have not cleared, that's also really important to follow up on because they should be clearing pretty quickly. Deposits don't usually stay out there for a long time. So make sure you're watching those as well. And also remember, you don't have to download this and store it anywhere extra. It's going to stay in QuickBooks forever. So you usually are pretty good there. If you're like me, though, at the end of the year, we do our year-end one and we kind of have that in a special spot ourselves. That's just part of our, pack rat nature as accountants, where we want to have all our work papers together. But otherwise, just know that it is sitting in QuickBooks forever. So you have it there. Well, that concludes our time going through reconciliations. Thank you all so much for being with me today. Jacqueline, back over to you.
Carla, thank you so much for leading us through that training. It's really meaningful to get to show the community an excerpt from our newly reimagined QuickBooks Online certification. And thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. We'll catch you next time.